Welcome back to PCS EdventuresLab. Today we're going to talk about the touch sensor as well as your LEDs. The touch sensor is just a button that when pressed will be used in your program to lead to some sort of action. Here we have the LED, and this simply either is in an on or off state where the lights are either on or off. So let's add a couple touch sensors and LEDs to our build and start programming it. Okay, let's start building using our touch sensors and our LEDs. Both the touch sensors and the LEDs work in the same way as most of your sensors, in that they use a basic sensor cable to be connected to your brain. So we'll connect this to our brain, and then we're going to take our touch sensors and we're going to place them on the front and back sides of our build. These are going to act as sort of bumpers so that when our rover runs into something, our program will be notified and we can react accordingly. So we'll plug this one in the back. And then what we're going to do with our LEDs is we're going to attach them using our sensor cables, and we're going to place one facing the front of our rover and one facing the back side of our rover. These are going to be used to notify which direction our rover is heading. So when we're heading forward, the light on the front will be on, and when we're heading backwards, the light facing the back side will be on. Okay, now we have our build finished and we're ready to start programming.
You're good.
Alrighty, here we are back in the Cortex. Let's go ahead and create a new program to program our LEDs and touch sensors. So the functionality that we're looking for is that when the button on the front of the REQ is tapped, our REQ will head in reverse, and when the button on the back side is tapped, it will head in the forward direction. So let's begin by just calling out our two motors, motors A and B, and we're going to turn them on. Now our motors are on. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a loop. We need a loop so that our touch sensors are constantly updating and being checked if they have been pressed. Now within our loop, we're going to have a couple of if statements, but let's start with the first one. And now we want to check in our if statement if our sensor has been pressed. So we can drag one of these block sensors over, make sure that you have the correct sensor value selected. But this if statement right now says that if sensor 0 is pressed, if our touch sensor is pressed, then it's going to run the code on this branch right here. So in this branch, let's go ahead and set motor A and B, motors A and B, we're going to set to go this way. Now, we're also using our LEDs, so we want to be able to turn on and off our LEDs based off of what button has been pressed. So here, we're going to include one light on command and one light off command. Sensors 0, 1 in our build are being used for the touch sensors. The LEDs are plugged into ports 3 and 4, so we're going to go ahead and turn on light 3 and turn off light 4. So now in our if statement, if sensor 0 is pressed, motors A and B go this way, light 3 is turned on and light 4 is turned off. Next, we need to add an if statement here, but to do that without overcrowding our program, we're going to add in several spacers. Spacers don't add any actual functionality to your program. They simply provide a space to create a cleaner looking program. Now that we have some spacers, we'll go ahead and add an if statement. And on this if statement, we're going to include another block sensor with sensor 1, which is our second touch sensor. If that second touch sensor is selected, we are going to take motors A and B, and we are going to set them to turn that way, opposite of what we did before. That way it heads in the opposite direction. Then, like above, we're going to grab a light on command and a light off command, but in this case we're going to turn on light 4 and turn off light 3, which is opposite of what we did in the first if statement. Finally, we can take our end and attach it to our loop, and let's read through our program and make sure it makes sense. So we begin our program by setting motor A and B to turn on. Then, within a loop, we check if either of the touch sensors are touched. If touch sensor 0 is selected, motors A and B will turn on this way, light 3 will turn on, light 4 will turn off. If the other sensor is touched, motors A and B will be that way and head in the opposite direction. Light 4 will turn on, and light 3 will turn off. So our program looks all right. Okay, now we have our touch sensor and LEDs programmed so that when we turn our rover on and this touch sensor runs into an object, it will head the opposite direction until the other touch sensor is pressed. When we are heading in the forward direction, our forward-facing LED should be on, and when in reverse, our backwards-facing LED should be on. Let's go ahead and run the program and see if it works. Okay. All right, just like that. Pretty neat. We saw it work exactly as we expected.